Hello, Canada. Hello, United States of America. Greetings to every single one of you here in Panama and all over the planet. My name is KevinJJohnston. This is the Kevin J. Johnston Show that runs every single Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Yes, tonight we're going to be meeting with Dr. Steve Turley. That is correct. We're going to talk to the guy that everybody here has wanted to have on this show for a very, very long time. And I just had a chat with him for 30 minutes. We've both agreed that he's the better looking of the two of us. Nonetheless, we're going to talk about politics, and some more politics throughout the entire night, because all of you need to hear not only what I've got to say, because the whole world hears me, but also what Dr. Steve Turley has to say, because he's living this insane American nightmare, no longer American dream, and he's doing it right inside the USA as of now. Now, for all the new fans of this show, for all the people who have been here or not been here before, my name's Kevin J. Johnston. Obviously, there it is. Watch the show every Tuesday and Thursday. Subscribe here on my Rumble channel at freedomreport.ca. And if you're watching on Twitter, please help a brother out and click on the follow button. I am obviously Canada's biggest mouth. Canadians do not like a guy with a big mouth like mine. The Canadian government has locked me up for 7 months of my life just for podcasting. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I also ran for mayor of, well, my hometown, Mississauga, twice, placed second in 2018, and did a lot of prison time just for running for mayor of Calgary. Look at the size of these crowds I used to get, and they said that I got fewer than 1,700 votes having crowds like that all summer long. Look, America, we're here to warn you tonight about the fact that Canada is full-blown communist. The country is dead. And I've been begging Americans for years, please do not let America become Canada. Regrettably, that seems to be happening faster and faster by the hour. And who better to talk about any of that aside from the astounding and the amazing Dr. Steve Turley. Thank you so much for being here. Such an honor to have you on the show.
The honor is all mine, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Come on. Hey, no, listen, I am so happy to see you face to face and talk to you. I was put onto your show a year and a half ago, been watching it steadily ever since. And everybody keeps saying, where's Turley? Get Turley, get him. Well,
you guys are great. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Really. Thank you. It's always, it's so interesting you're talking about where we had a half-hour conversation beforehand. Isn't it neat how when you share values, you feel like you've known each other forever? It's almost like we're just first meeting, and yet it feels like we just picked up where we left off on our last conversation just a couple of years back or something like that. It's just, it's so cool. I love it. I love it. And I love hanging out with you.
Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to let my American audience know here that, and of course, all the new folks watching this show for the first time, that I did live, even as a Canadian citizen, I lived in the United States from 1996 to the year 2000. And I made a boatload of money doing it because America is awesome that way. The business of America is business, and the business of Canada is, I don't know, Marxism and failure. So when I returned to Canada in the year 2000, I went 16 years not being able to find work because they were not hiring white males. That's just how it was in Canada. So I started ranting and raving online, and the Canadian government didn't like it. So they just kept locking me up and sending the cops to my front door. I've been stabbed by an Islamic adherent. I have been pistol whipped by the cops, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police broke 3 of my ribs after I exposed Justin Trudeau and his man-on-man orgy back in 2017. And I'm proud of all of that. And I mean all of it. So, Dr. Turley, what's going on in the USA that compares to Canada? Please let us know.
Well, of course, well, there's a lot that compares, and there's still some that contrasts. We could start wherever you like. I mean, we're dealing with the same. We're dealing with the same erosion of liberalism. Our societies were supposedly going to be liberal societies coming out of the Enlightenment, and liberal societies were supposedly grounded in reason and freedom. That's what we were told. Most scholars who look at liberalism recognize that it's founded on 2 fundamental tenets, two roots, as it were, and that is an emphasis on reason as over and against religion in all matters of public policy, and then a restraint of executive power so as to maximize individual freedom. And those play off of each other. Mary
Right.
Poovey is a scholar on knowledge. She actually looks at the history of knowledge. You found that in the 18th and 19th century, liberal thinkers, and I'm talking about classical liberalism here in the Anglo-Protestant tradition, they really saw reason as the means of keeping our leaders in check. Back in the day, our leaders claimed that they had special access to a knowledge that we weren't privy to by virtue of their ordination, whether as a prince, a bishop, or what have you. And but now with reason, with common sense, we can access reality in the same way they can through laws of logic and so forth. So whatever policies that they wanted to pass, they had to be able to persuade us using the same laws of logic that we were privy to. So reason and freedom tended to go hand in hand. But who more undermine those two central tenets than liberals themselves? Whether it was in the advent of modernity in the 1960s and our mutual universities, both in Canada and the United States, the 1960s, Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. And virtually every department outside of, say, the hard sciences, all the departments, psychology, literary criticism, cultural anthropology, sociology, they were all arguing that knowledge is actually just a social construct and nothing more. And so every culture has its own way of knowledge. Again, that may be true here or there, but that radically undermined reason as the one way of basically understanding reality. And then that went mainstream in the 1970s. You had a French scholar by the name of Francois Lyotard who wrote his book Postmodern Condition, where he found most Westerners didn't believe in scientific rationalism as being the one true way of understanding reality anymore. And then you have Patrick Deneen's thesis that because liberals reimagined the human person as a sovereign individual, total radical individual that had no moral obligations apart from that which he or she chose to impose upon his or herself, then all of our mediating institutions, our intermediary institutions, family, church, community, guilds, private organizations, they all began to erode. And then the government came in, particularly in its welfare capacity, and filled that vacuum. So now, instead of being rational and free, our liberal societies have become what? They become irrational and repressive. And those two combine in wokeness itself. And no one now in our higher echelon of the elites in our regime, they don't believe that we have a common reason that they have to be able to appeal to justify their policies. No, as far as they're concerned, they have an expert knowledge. They're the credentialed class, and they don't have to explain anything to us cretins, to us knuckle draggers. They can impose upon us whatever they want because they apparently have alone the competence to be able to run our technocratic society. And so, unfortunately, we're living in a time what scholars call neo-feudalization, where it's the most extraordinary thing is that classical liberalism got us out of the feudal era, but liberals now are bringing us back, ironically, because we're living in a comparable caste system where more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer people. All they're superimposing upon us a new religious fundamentalism in the form of wokeness. So that's the world we're living in right now in the West. The good news, as you are on the front lines of it, and we were talking earlier, there was a massive backlash against it all over the West and all over the world because the world doesn't want to be run by a bunch of feudalist Western elites.
Correct. Okay, so to reflect on a couple of things you've said there, you are correct about this liberalism, this liberal mindset getting in there. In Canada, there are 5 branches of government, and all 5 branches of government are completely run by the left-wing freaks. And that's the terminology I'm going to use. So we're talking the federal government, obviously, with sock boy, we call him jihadi Justin Trudeau, him and his ilk, especially the vice prime minister now, or the deputy prime minister, as she's called, the granddaughter of a Nazi, literally. Yeah, they're in charge. But then the provincial governments, with the exception
Mhm.
of one, they're all far left. The
Mhm.
municipalities are all far left. And then you've got the judiciary and the educational, like the administrative, all run by left wing. Now, I had to escape this
Yeah.
because there's been 7 legitimate attempts on my life as a Canadian journalist. So I had to bolt. I went to Costa Rica for a short while, couldn't make money there. Came here to Panama, doing very well. This country's amazing. Now, I want to reflect on one thing here because you brought up a really good point, and then I want to get your take on it. Here in Panama, where I have been for the last almost 6 months now, you cannot tell what a Panamanian looks like because everybody from the West Indies, everybody from Mexico, everybody from Latin America, white people, everyone's mixed. So you just cannot tell. There's even Aztec blood and Mayan blood in Panama here, but they're all under one common banner. Nationalism is incredibly strong here. Everybody who lives in Panama is a Panamanian, and the rest of the nonsense out there is not accepted. They tried to bring Gay Pride Day here. 40 showed up. 1,000 counter protesters with crosses showed up to counter protest, and so they should. And that is what America and Canada actually used to be. Is Americans and Canadians used to stand on each other's borders shouting, like, oh, the Leafs are the best. No, we want the Rangers. There used to be that level of pride. Now there's no such thing. So please, I want to get your take on what happened to America's pride.
Well, it's there, but it's selective. Eric Kaufman, actually Canadian, who's actually in London now. I believe he just left University of London. He's now at Buckingham College, which is a new rising kind of free speech center-right college in Britain. But he does some really interesting scholarship that found that it became very popular among our bougie, among our elite in the 19th century to really hate on Western civilization. It's somewhat justifiable in that it was right after the Enlightenment and kind of the cold, hard scientific rationalism took over. And then 19th century Industrial Revolution. This is where the mass society starts rising up. This is where we start getting our big media in our cosmopolitan centers, so the New York Times and the Washington Post and all that sort of, all centered around big cities. And the bourgeois looked romantically and affectionately on more primitive, esoteric, non-Western society as where it was really at. So it just became fashionable to really hate on Western society. It seems Marxism was able to kind of latch on to that, become a parasite onto that, and really push this rabid hatred of Western civilization. And that went commonplace in something called emancipatory politics. It's very globalist. But globalism hates nationalism. Nationalism puts impediments, borders put impediments on globalism. Globalism is transnational. It extends beyond frontiers. And so globalism tends to impose this form of politics known as emancipatory politics. And emancipatory politics reimagines culture, custom, and tradition as bigoted, racist, and all kinds of phobic. I mean, all the kids are learning this in school. If you're going to a public school, that's what they're getting. You'll notice, I don't know what it is in Canada. I'm assuming it's the same thing. In the United States, you look at any public school mission statement or vision statement, it's always to form global citizens. That's what we're here for. We're here to make these students global, not making them better Canadians, not making them better Albertans, not making them better Americans, not making them better Texans. It's about making them global citizens. So how do you emancipate the sovereign individual from culture, custom, and tradition impediments? By recasting culture, custom, and tradition as bigoted, racist, all kinds of phobic. So there's a lot of dynamics behind it, but bottom line, you're considered now to be educated. You're considered to be in the know. You're considered to be cosmopolitan. If you hate on your nation, your culture, your custom, your tradition. Now, the good news again, whether it's the Freedom Convoy that we saw in Ottawa, or what we're seeing with the MAGA movement here, what we're seeing with the rise of the so-called far right in Europe, which is just civilizational populism. We're seeing it in Latin America as well. There is a massive, massive blowback against that, where more and more populations are rejecting that ideology, that far left ideology, and are returning quite proudly to nation, or better, maybe I should say just very gratefully, to nation, culture, custom, and tradition. As a matter of fact, John Mearsheimer, the political scholar from the University of Chicago, he basically argues liberalism and the liberal international order is destined to die on the altar of this rising nationalism. In fact, religion and nationalism today are the two most powerful forces in the world, and I don't think liberal globalism is going to be able to compete very well with it.
Well, I don't think so either, considering the fact that over 1 million Iranians have now switched to Christianity. They're tired.
Isn't that
of the
fascinating?
rules.
Yes, yeah, you saw that.
They're tired of the rules within Islam. Yeah, and look, I've studied Islam for 20 years. It's ugly stuff. That Quran is not a holy book. It is a manual on how to destroy civilizations. And believe me, in Europe right now, they are playing it perfectly. What really sucks in Canada, like you're saying there, is not only are the left wing in charge of Canada, but radical Islam runs all of the province of Ontario in the south. That's a problem, considering the fact that Toronto now, the entire area signifies over 6.5 million people. It is by far the biggest city in North America. It's the 4th busiest airport there. There's highways that run through this thing all over the place, and radical Islam runs it all. And I know this quite well, because whenever I was doing my reports on that, the number of attacks, the number of assaults, the number of tires slashed and so on, it just kept going. Right. And we also, for a short while in the province of Ontario, had a radical Muslim as the attorney general for the entire province. So imagine 14.5 million people live in that province. That's a third of the country's population.
That's a lot. Yeah.
And that's who is in charge of the courts. Then the left wing, as you said, the liberals, latched onto that, and they would call anyone like you and I Islamophobic, like that was somehow a bad thing. And, we'd lose our sponsors. We'd lose social standing. People would be terrified to be near us, mainly because they thought, not because they cared about the bigotry of the statements. And it's not bigotry, it's just facts. But they're concerned about being blown up. And so it tells you that people know the truth, but they'll run from it every chance they get. So we have the liberals running everything in Canada. We've got the liberals the Democrats destroying everything in America. And there's just not enough conservatives standing up and stopping it. Aside from Kyle Rittenhouse, I can't imagine that I know any other examples of stopping this. So tell me, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, I think the MAGA movement is very strong, very powerful. Okay. It's not just Trump now. It's Tucker Carlson's rising up. It's Vivek Ramaswamy. It's J.D. Vance. It's the richest man on the planet, Elon Musk, who's really, interestingly enough, tapped into civilizational discourse probably more than any other public figure right now. I mean, he's building rockets, being able to get us up to Mars, so as to be able to save civilization, lest one massive rock smack into ours. Right. So he is just absolutely. I mean, that's why he bought Twitter. He bought Twitter in order to save civilization. I mean, he's always thinking that way. That's very, very fascinating stuff. Jordan Peterson is on the front lines of this as well. Russell Brand has just had a major religious conversion. Very, very powerful stuff. I have to say, I do think it's really beautiful. We just had the Save the Republic rally in Washington, D.C. And two of the major speakers was a Brit and a Canadian, Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson. Again, it's just the same thing. It's like when we share the same values, the world actually becomes quite beautiful and quite unified. But no, I think right now we're seeing red states get red. Well, so you're right. I'm sure all your listeners are obviously know. So using the American color scheme of our partisan color scheme. So and yours would be we're getting bluer, but our red states are getting redder, more conservative. That we're seeing that
Good.
in Iowa. We're seeing it in Ohio. Remember, Iowa and Ohio used to be purple or even blue. Iowa voted for Mike Dukakis in 1988. Voted for Obama twice. Same with Ohio. Same with Florida. These were swing states, battleground states. They're now solid red. This is the first election we've ever had, presidential election, where Iowa, Ohio, and Florida are not considered swing states anymore, and they're moving hard right. I don't think North Carolina is either. North Carolina has a super majority, hardcore Republican legislature. So I don't really see that either. Some are arguing you probably won't see it in Arizona either. Arizona seems to be going pretty deep red as well. Again, we'll see. Virginia, amazingly, we're seeing a massive uprising in the early voting in Virginia. If you want to take a step back,
sure.
I mean, the state of the race right now is very interesting because you really have three things to keep an eye on. We've got the polls, we've got the voter registration numbers, which are really interesting, and then we've got the early voting. And then the idea is you want to look at those three things to see if you can abstract a pattern out of them. And I think we are seeing a very clear pattern. So the polls, it just doesn't matter what poll you look at, whether it's the pro Kamala puff polls that ABC throws out there, or Quinnipiac, or Morning Consult. Sorry, when I talk to pollsters, they always, real professional pollsters, they call Morning Consult Morning Compost because it's just so bad. It's always off by double digits when you look at the Real Clear Politics polling average. So you look at 2020, they thought Biden was going to win by like 17 or so. I mean, they're always so bad, but it doesn't matter. You take any poll out there right now, Trump is doing significantly better than he has ever done, either in 2016 or 2020. And the Democrat is significantly, or is weaker than the Democrat has ever been against him. So at this time last year, most polls had Biden, or last election, had Biden up by 10, 12 points. Now, Atlas Intel, the single most accurate poll of 2020, has Trump up by 3 nationally, which is amazing because, you got to counting New York, and you got to count LA and San Francisco and Chicago into that. So doesn't matter what poll you're looking at, doesn't matter. They all show that Trump is doing better than he has ever done. He's stronger than he's ever been. And the Democrat is weaker than they've ever been, either in 2016 or 2020 against him. When you look at voter registration, we're seeing the same thing. Republicans have been dominating in every single state in terms of voter registration, for the exception of Colorado. It may just be the pot, all the pot smoking in Colorado. I don't know what it is, but Republicans have outnumbered Democrats by 1 million in Florida, by 350,000 in New York, deep blue New York, 330,000 in Pennsylvania. It's amazing stuff. And the reason why that's important is because of the self-identification vote. So what Gallup has done over the years is they have tracked how people self-identify, which is the leading indicator. The lagging indicator is what you actually register as.
Right.
But the leading indicator is who do you identify more as, a Republican or Democrat? So in 2008, Democrats had a +8 identification advantage, and Obama went on to win the popular vote by almost that 7.2. In 2012, Democrats had a +4 party identification advantage. Obama went on to win the popular vote by 3.9. In 2016, the Democrats had a +3 party identification advantage, and Hillary Clinton went on to win the popular vote by 2.1. So you're seeing the pattern there. And in 2020, Democrats had a +5 party identification advantage. Biden went on to win the popular vote by 4.5. And so Gallup's party identification advantage right now, Republicans +3. It's the first time they've ever seen it. Republicans have never led before. So it's Republicans +3. So that's huge. If that pattern still holds, if we don't see the shenanigans, which we will, the question is whether or not it's too big to rig kind of thing. If it's too overwhelming, and there's been a lot of pretty healthy election integrity measures. And then finally, we've got the early voting, and in all the early voting, whether it's Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida, wherever they keep record of the partisan spread, in every single one, Democrats are down and Republicans are up. The Democrats may be voting more, but the Republicans have totally eaten away at the massive margins that they would be able to amass by the time you get to election day. And we always come out, Republicans always come out on election day, but we haven't been able to overwhelm that massive margin that the early voting Democrats were able to accumulate either in 2020 or 2022. They're not accumulating anymore. Republican voter mobilization, early vote mobilization is through the roof. And we now have data that shows that at least 20% of those Republican voters are first-time voters. They're prop voters, as we say, So we're not cannibalizing our vote. It's not like we're getting election day voters just to switch over and vote early. No, these are brand new voters. And the brand new voter is overwhelmingly voting Republican right now. So these are all very, very good signs. Anything could change. We still got another 30 days plus to go. Anything could change. But right now, things look very good.
I got to ask, we've watched Biden make a fool of himself, not knowing where he is. I mean, obviously the guy has dementia or something.
Obviously, yeah.
Like it, obvious. And the whole world has lost respect for the United States as a result. You know, I'll never forget when Trump first went to Saudi Arabia. He got off the plane, and all you saw was a whole bunch of turbans around him like this. They were just excited. They had to shake his hand. It was unreal. Obama made the mistake of going there and bowing like an idiot.
Yes,
Trump
you remember that. Yeah.
With his chin out, and he shook hands. Incredible. And then I watched him when he went over to North Korea, standing on the South Korean border, asking if he could come in, and just walked in. Unbelievable. It's incredible. So we've had Biden not doing that. We've had Joe Biden all over the country at every football game imaginable. And then they go ahead and they just remove him. And now Kamala Harris somehow is in place. Now, do you think that this jump in the polls is because of the buffoonery of Kamala Harris? Because she is a fool. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. No, I've talked to particularly Rich Barris of the People's Pundit. Talked to a number of polling analysts who Rich Barris had he's part of Big Data Poll. He had the second most accurate polling of 2020. He's brilliant. So when Glenn Youngkin did the unthinkable and won Virginia, actually by 2 points, Rich called virtually every single county down to like the margin of error. The guy is brilliant. And he's looked at all those polls and he said it's classic response bias. And response bias is when something really, splashy is happening in the news. When you go and you poll, those who are happy about it tend to be the most likely to answer the call when the pollster calls, or the most likely to volunteer their time. Those who don't like it and don't want anything to do with it, they tend to hide from pollsters. They don't want anything to do with it. So when all's said and done, Democrat constituencies are overrepresented in these polls. And so that's how you get this Kamala +5, +6, which is absurd. It's not going to happen. She's hemorrhaging the Democrat constituency vote like no Democrat we've seen in the modern era. She's lost the working class vote. The working class vote on both sides of the Atlantic is now thoroughly right-wing right now. They used to, Labor was the foundation of the center left in post-World War II political realignment. That is over. Those days are gone. They have moved to the so-called far right now. Biden, he did okay with them because he's old Scranton Joe, from rural Pennsylvania. He was able to do okay with them, but they have completely abandoned California Kamala. They don't want to have anything to do with her. So they're voting for Trump by a margin of 30 points right now. Remember, Hillary, this is what shocked Hillary. We first saw it in 2016 with back-to-back defections by the working class away from their respective Democrat and Labor Party MPs. We saw it with Brexit on June 23rd, 2016, when working class in regions that had never voted for Tories or conservatives and so forth defected en masse away from their Labor MPs who wanted to stay in the EU, and they voted for the referendum. And if I could, and Matt Goodwin, the British scholar, has done some excellent research in this. He found that a significant portion of the pro-Brexit vote hadn't voted in a British election in 10 to 20 years. There was nothing to vote for. Both parties were the same. They're the uniparty, right? They're the duopoly. There's nothing to vote for. You put an independence referendum on the ticket, they'll come out en masse. We're seeing the same thing now. We're seeing the same thing, that this is probably the first election where the bigger the turnout, the more it's going to benefit the Republican, because it's bringing out low prop and no prop. So low propensity, no propensity voters who haven't voted at all, or who have voted very rarely because there was nothing to vote for. They now want to come out and vote for Trump, just like they want to come out and vote for Brexit. So what we found is the working class voted for Brexit, and more people voted for Brexit than had voted for any UK political party or politician ever. The biggest election ever in the UK's history was the Brexit election, and we won. Our side won.
I remember Nigel side won. He was so proud of himself. He goes straight to the pub and has a beer.
Yes.
He was just posting the victory. I remember that.
Absolutely. Same thing happened in November, where more and more of these working class voters who had voted Democrat in every single presidential election for decades. We're talking nearly 200 counties in Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Ohio, suddenly defected away from Hillary and voted for Trump. And even if Hillary had gotten the same black vote that Obama got, she still would have lost, because she lost the working class by that badly. And we're seeing the same thing with the rise of Marine Le Pen in France, Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Viktor Orban in Hungary. The Vox Party in Spain. Everywhere we're looking today, we're seeing a mass defection of the working class. And the more that working class defects, the harder it's going to be for the traditional center-left party to win, because they were so dependent on that Labor vote. But she's losing them. She's losing blacks. We're now having polls showing that Black men under 50, upwards of 30 to 40% are ready to vote for Trump. She's losing the non-college grad. She's losing Latinos. Trump is getting possibly as high as 20 points more Latino support than he got in 2020. You can't win an election losing your own constituencies like that.
Okay, so this is my thought, is I think personally that everyone's a little bit tired of this race baiting nonsense. I guess the Democrats figured that people would vote for her because she's a woman and not white.
Yeah, check the box. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Now we've got that same kind of nonsense going on in Canada. I got to show for our American audience here. This is Jagmeet Singh. He is the leader of the New Democratic Party, a highly Marxist, highly communist party. And if this guy's party were to win in Canada, that's our next prime minister. This is a guy who is a wanted felon in India. He goes there, he goes away for years. He goes bye-bye for like 20 years. It's ridiculous. And I think finally the conservative groups in Canada are just done with this color nonsense. And I'm wondering, is it the same thing in the United States? Are we just done having this color anti-white rhetoric shoved down our throats with Kamala? Please, let's get your comments on that.
Yeah, I think so. I think what we're seeing is a movement away from identity politics more and more to actually more class based politics. And that's just the
Mhm.
nature of populism in general. So populism basically realigns the electorate around a vertical divide as opposed to a horizontal divide. So we talk a lot about this on the channel. We generally think of politics as a horizontal divide, left versus right, liberal versus conservative, Democrat versus Republican, Tory versus whatever. Um, Populists literally stand that on its head and say, no, 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 it's more of a vertical divide. It's the people versus the permanent political class. It's the ruled versus the rulers. It's the ordinary citizen versus the oligarch. And when you have politics redefined that way, it's hard to maintain the old resentment politics of identity politics, which is no, the problem's whites, the problem's blacks, the problem's Latinos, the problem's this guy. No, no. Now the resentment is no, the problem are the elites. The problem are those in power who are selling our country out for their own political and economic benefit at the expense of our values, interests, and concerns that we all share. We all want a good economy. We all want good jobs. We all want good schools for our kids. We all want our neighborhoods to be safe. And so this more vertical divide is actually doing a lot to just shatter identity politics. So the first defections were the white working class in 2016 and 2020. Now we're seeing the non-white working class defect and come on over to Trump. And we're seeing it again all over the world, in Europe as well, where it's not so much race anymore that's defining things, but rather where are you on that vertical hierarchy? Are you part of the wider population, the people who want to save their nation and restore national sovereignty and restore economic sanity and restore our shared customs, cultures, and traditions, which are historically rooted in our shared Christian faith, again, just however defined, or are we gonna allow these elites to create these wedge identities so as to divide us and then conquer us? And that's basically what they become experts at. That's what emancipatory politics majors in. It majors in recasting portions of the population, certain members of the population, as somehow inherently bigoted, racist, all kinds of phobic. Matt Walsh's latest movie, Am I a Racist, explores this brilliantly. I saw it over the last 2 weekends ago. And
and I'll be able to see that here in Panama City, Panama, not Florida, for $6 in Ultra D box.
Oh,
it's
neat.
down here. The theaters are ultra modern. I love this country. So, all right. For those who are asking on TikTok and over here on Kick, I'm talking to Dr. Stephen Turley, who is an amazing American podcaster. Obviously, well, listen to him. The guy's brilliant. So if you're ever wondering who he is, please head on over to his website. Doc, where do people find you online?
Yeah, they can go to Turley Talks, my last name, Turley Talks, like TED Talks.com, or they can just punch my name into YouTube or Twitter or X now or Rumble, any one of those.
Oh, and I have to scold everybody. Hold on. Hey, guys, come on. Double fingers, both of you, everyone. Just double fingers. Get those likes going on TikTok and over here on Kick, please. It really does help. If you're watching on Rumble, you see below the P in the Freedom Report logo, bottom right, there's a thumbs up button. Just hit that. It really helps. If you're on Twitter right now, well, they used to call it retweeting. It's reposted, please. Exit out there. Get it going. Let the whole world see what we're talking about here, because what the doc, well, he still has an hour and 15 minutes to go. There's a lot we're going to be covering. So, please get it out there for the world to see. The more likes, the better. If we can get to 20,000 likes, that really just fires it right on up.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, TikTok is remarkable. I don't know what it is about TikTok, but the lives do incredibly well.
That's great.
Really well. So thank you to everybody on TikTok who does all of that. Okay. The United States has an opportunity here to go down the pathway of Canada and become a communist dump with no jobs and no opportunity. Oh, and let's just cover this for a second, Doc, because I really got to get your take on the American Constitution. We have two bills in Canada right now that are ugly as sin. Bill 293 is going to surrender all medical autonomy in the country of the Dominion of Canada to the World Health Organization. A big mistake, because they're just a bunch of murdering thieves. That's all that they. I've been to war zones. I've seen the end result of the World Health Organization when they go. They just leave corpses behind. And the other one is Bill C-63. This one's called the Online Harms Act. Now, if you were to insult the LGBTQs, for example, online, or if I went online, still living in Canada, saying there's two sexes, I would do lifetime in prison for it. That's exactly what, lifetime prison sentence. Also, the law has been written so that if someone thinks you'll say something in the future, they call the police, cops come to your door, they put an ankle bracelet on you without a court order, and you got to wear this thing during your arraignment, and you may make bail, and then again, you may not, and the fines will be $50,000. America is in danger of following suit with that. And I really don't want to see that happen. So, freedom of speech. John Kerry, is it? He was talking about removing freedom of speech from the U.S. Constitution. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms has freedom of conscience and thought and religion. However, where the American Constitution says we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, the Canadian Charter says, we're not going to write any laws that impede you from living life unless we think about writing some laws to impede your life and take away your freedoms, in which case we will. That's clause 1 of this Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So please, tell us, what are the chances of the American Constitution being changed? And do Americans still respect this freedom of speech that you have and is remarkable? Go.
Yes, I do. It's very hard to convince Americans to give up freedoms. It's hard. So what our elites have to do is they have to convince us that we're at risk. So this is where the whole notion of risk society comes in. And a risk society is where technocratic elites mitigate risk by convincing the population to give up their freedoms, but in order to find safety. So we obviously did this with the Patriot Act, so that we came under surveillance. It's very interesting that if you think it through, Kevin, it's the Republicans that gave us the Patriot Act and this mass surveillance society. And then ironically now, who are the victims of this surveillance and getting locked up as a result of this Patriot Act? Republicans, right? J6 victims, basically. That's so it's come full circle. We saw it very much in this risk society rhetoric, very much prevalent in, of course, COVID. And it worked for a time, because we were scared to death of killing grandma if we didn't do what we were told. And they tried to sell it with us on disinformation and misinformation. The disinformation is trying to steal our elections. It's Russians who are trying to steal our elections. And misinformation, again, during COVID, could end up killing grandma. So we have to censor and so forth. I think the good news is when you look at all of the polls right now, that is almost it's almost completely been totally defeated. Nobody wants anything to do with it. As a matter of fact, the ones who are dead set against it tend to be Zoomers, Gen Zers, people under 30. They're being called, to credit to Canada, they're being called the Jordan Peterson generation. And it's largely because of how powerfully he's been able to intellectually defend and give a very persuasive apologetic for the absolute necessity for our humanity of free speech, because free speech inevitably involves freedom of thought, because we express our thought. It's not even we express. Our thoughts are constituted by words and by language and speech. So in America, we don't want it. Here's the problem, Kevin. Here's the dilemma. Because the way a risk society works is, first, they will try to persuade you that you are in harm's way, that you are in danger, and you need to give up your freedoms so that we can protect you, because that's what governments are supposed to do. They're supposed to protect you. As long as we comply, everything's cool, no problem. Then we got a Supreme Court that's been pretty good of late, that pushes back, that knocks down the mandates, claims all these mandates are unconstitutional alike. And then the people start saying, yeah, this is terrible. This is horrible. You're taking away our freedoms. What the government can do is it could turn around and say, oh, okay, you don't agree with us? Well, again, remember what we talked about earlier. We have a knowledge. We've got intelligence. We've, from our national security agencies that show you're in harm, and it's our responsibility to protect you, whether you want us to or not. So that's the one thing I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the people. The people that's the one thing that these neo-feudalist Marxist elites have not conquered. They've conquered, this, they've conquered all of our cultural institutions. That's what cultural Marxism does. They've conquered all of even our churches. Half of our churches are, are conquered territory at this point, where the pastor's just giving Marxist sermons at this point. They've conquered all the institutions. They have not conquered the people. The people are standing up against this. So I'm not afraid of them. The one thing I am concerned is that the government can, in effect, say, okay, you're not persuaded because you don't know, and we can't share this secret knowledge we've got because it's coming from these national security agencies. We'd be compromising national security. So we're going to have to clamp down on your freedoms, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. Now, hopefully the delegitimization of our state and our public institutions is strong enough for people to push back like they push back in Eastern Europe behind the Iron Curtain, and eventually knock down the Berlin Wall. It took a while. Took a few decades. But every time the Soviets tanks would come in and clear them out, the next huge blowback would get bigger and bigger and bigger, So whether it's Czechoslovakia, or whether it was Poland, whether it was Hungary, whatever it was, they just kept getting bigger and bigger until it finally collapsed. So I'm hoping that the delegitimization of the state and our public institutions has reached a level where the government try to do it by force against our expressly stated wishes, that things would go down, that there'd be enough people to push back that the government would have to retreat from that. But we'll have to see. But that's my concern. You always take away freedom by appealing to safety, by appealing to risk. That's how they do it. It's worked in the past, but it's getting harder and harder because they suddenly become Chicken Little. Right? The sky's falling. And then after a while, people are just like, I don't believe it anymore. I'm not buying it.
Well, you are correct that the Soviet tanks just keep coming in. Now, figuratively speaking, that's going on in Canada right now. There are 305 political prisoners in Canada currently, journalists and just protesters who wanted their freedom back during, well, we can't say what because YouTube will give us a strike if we say it, but you know what it was, which never happened, which wasn't real. They just kept locking people up. Even I put out a book almost 4 years ago now. This one, Masks Are BS, everyone. I'm actually giving it away for free on my website. Just go to KevinJJohnston.ca. And if you head over to it, you can get the ebook for free with the coupon code KJJ Instagram 1. Police came to my door telling me not to publish it. If I published it, I would do prison time. Now, they threw me in the back of a car for about an hour and a half. And they were actually reading the book and they were laughing at it because I wrote the book to be a 1980s over-the-top offensive stand-up comedy routine. You can't, you cannot teach people anything unless you're making them angry or making them laugh.
Yeah,
and there's a ton of great jokes in the book.
Yeah.
So they're laughing at this thing, and then finally the one cop says, "Why the hell is he in the back of the car?" So Well, because we're following orders, and they eventually got the radio call that they had to let me out because the at the time Attorney General of the province of Ontario did not want to pursue charges. They got me later on when I was running for mayor of Calgary. They kept locking me up then. So yeah, they keep pushing Canadians right now, locking up more and more and more people. Now, Canadian prisons are worse than American prisons by a lot. Now, because of my podcast, because I talk and I won't shut up, I've now seen the inside of 11 or 12 that I can think of, and they all suck. They all look at me right now. I'm 200 pounds at this particular weight. When I went in the first time during my mayor run for the city of Calgary, this one here, I polled number 1 on a small poll put out by a Christian group. And 2 hours later, I was away for 7 weeks. In that time, I don't think it was even 900 calories a day that they would feed us. Wow. I came in only 7 weeks. I came out 35 pounds lighter. Wow. My face was all scooched right in. You could see skull fragments through my skin. It was ridiculous. And that is what they're doing right now. It's just the hammer, hammer, hammer. The only problem is that Canadians don't fight. They're sheep. It's really bad. So in the case now of the Democrats, they keep hitting. I can see where Americans are going to fight back by electing Trump. What happens if the Democrats steal this election? Go ahead.
Yeah, which is a very real possibility. Yes, I like that's right. It is a very real possibility that we're going to have to steal ourselves for. No pun intended. STEEL ourselves for. But yeah, no question on that. I think if that were to happen, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Were Kamala to win, I think you're going to see a split. The world is already fragmenting. That's one of the key characteristics of the post-Cold War era. So post-1991, more than 35 nations have been added to the world map since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this is largely through a dynamic known as re-territorialization, where the loss in confidence in globalism and globalistic structures that amass tremendous amount of power and the wealth in the hands of very, very few. That's the blowback against that is basically re-territorializing politics. It's bringing political decision-making back to the local. But it's happening in all kinds of ways. It's happening in separatist movements. It's happening in new nationalist movements. It's happening in civilizationalist movements like we're seeing in China and Russia and India and Turkey and the like. It's happening in all kinds of ways. But one of the primary ways it's happening is these separatist movements. And that's where you're seeing so much secessionism and balkanization and fragmentation and social fission all over the place. So I don't think there'll necessarily be a formal split, a formal secession, although Texit, I can promise you, will be more popular than it's ever been. I know Dan Miller. He's a good guy. He's the president of the Texas National Movement, and he will be busier than he's ever been were Kamala to win. I saw it in 2021 after Biden won. Texas got a huge boost. I think you're going to see a lot of people moving to Texas and just moving to deep red states. And that's what I think you'll see. You'll see more or less a functional secession, an informal secession, or some have called it a soft secession, where you're going to see more and more red states function as sanctuary states, where you'll see their politicians will have to, by the demand of the citizens, erect legal and administrative walls between themselves and D.C. We saw that with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, what he was doing at the border wall with border security there. D.C. ordered him to stop. Even SCOTUS at one point, our Supreme Court came in and told him to stop. And he said, make me. He called their bluff. He said, the entire nation is behind me. All right. Supermajority want me to lock up this border and secure it. You want to go and you want to push my Texas Guard out of the way, and then you want to knock down our fortifications? Be my guest. That'd be the best political commercial we could ever dream of having. He was very bold. He called their bluff and he won. They backed off. So I think you're going to see that on steroids if Kamala wins.
Yeah.
The citizens will demand it because and also, Kevin, because she commands absolutely no respect whatsoever. Absolutely
Yeah.
none whatsoever. We all know
I've seen it.
we all know she slept her way to the top. We all know that. We all know she's in the position that she's in right now, not because of competence, not because she's qualified. She when she ran, as you know, when she ran for the Democrat nomination in 2020, she barely got 1% of support. She never won a single delegate in her entire life in a primary. So she has no respect whatsoever. And so I think sanctuary red states will erect a sort of arc, as it were, administrative walls that protect their citizens from DC. And then I think you're going to continue to see what we've been seeing since 2021. And that's a mass exodus of citizens leaving blue states and moving to red states. Again, if you're from Canada, right? Just the opposite, right? So in fact, it's more precise than that. We're finding that people are leaving blue counties and moving to red counties. So we've got studies that found that of the 555 counties, you'll love these stats, of the 555 counties that voted for Biden, 343, 62% have lost population since November 3rd, 2020. Of the 2,589 counties that voted for Trump, 1,726, almost parity, 67% of those counties gained population during the same time period. And what's even so fascinating is that red counties inside blue states grew even when their predominant blue counties lost population. And in red states, their blue counties lost population, even as their red counties grew. So you definitely see this mass migration. They're called refugees. I think that's what you would call yourself, right? They're refugees. They're leaving this dying, dilapidating sort of, end of civilization vibe of this neo-feudalist Marxism, and they're going to where society is vibrant. And for most of them, it's going to be red states. But for others, like yourself, they're going outside of the United States and Canada, and they're finding Nayib Bukele's El Salvador to be a place where they can flourish, or Jair Bolsonaro's Brazil, at least at that time, until Lula took back over a couple of years back, or Javier Milei's Argentina is doing pretty darn well. Or they're going over to, I know several people going to Viktor Orban's Hungary, and they feel like they can breathe. They feel, or Giorgia Meloni's Italy. I was able to go and visit out there, and she's doing a fantastic job. She's finally getting the migration thing under control, down 60%. It's pretty impressive stuff.
You did forget to mention our president here now.
I'm sorry. That's right. I forgot. In Panama. That's right.
Panamanian, the new leadership of Panama, which took office this year, hates Kamala Harris. Yeah. They hate the Democrats. They hate left-wingism. So there's been a lot of my clients coming down here to Panama to check it out. As soon as they see this Americanized city, which is very much like New York, Montreal, and Miami of the 1980s. Wow. Everyone just buy property and they stay.
Yeah.
It's remarkable when the rest of the world wants what America used to have.
Yeah.
They are putting everything into infrastructure here.
Yep.
And all the rich guys and all the rich gals, all the billionaires, they're all coming here.
Yep.
Because they need to get away from the craziness of the UK and the Marxism and the communism of Canada and the blue states in the United States of America.
Yeah.
So you have a book coming out, do you not? Let's throw this up on the screen. Yeah. Talk about this for a second.
Go ahead. I do. Yeah. No, thank you for that, Kevin. Yeah. So this just came out. It's called Fight: How Trump and the MAGA Movement Are Changing the World. It's we're doing a launch party, a live online launch party tomorrow night. So just go to my website or go to my YouTube channel and you'll see information on that. I wish I should have this is where my team just gets so mad at me. It's like, Turley, can't you remember a link? I forget. I don't remember. I think, if you go to fight.turleytalks.com, there might be a link there as well. But it's free. It's just we're just having a really cool launch party tomorrow night, but it hasn't even officially launched. It's already #1 in 2 categories on Amazon. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh, that's absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really
Congratulations
cool.
on that. We'll put that up a few more times tonight. So, yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing that tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you and I were talking about it earlier, and again, that's why I love chatting with you and my fellow patriots in the formerly at the Great White North. But I think it was a book I wrote because I kept hearing a misconception on both the left and the right here in the United States. And that's this notion that Trump and the MAGA movement are somehow very specific to America, that they're a uniquely American phenomenon. And granted, there's some rationale to that. It is after all, make America great again, and it's a tagline for Trump. But what I find most interesting, what's animated my scholarship over the last several years, is how we are finding virtually identical movements happening all over the world, particularly in Latin America and Europe. We talked about the Brexit vote and the rise of Nigel Farage, and the same very similar dynamics, very similar political realignment, particularly with the working class going on in the UK. Even Boris Johnson actually said that Brexit would make Britain great again. He actually used that tagline. Same dynamics with Marine Le Pen in France. And
can I just say something for a second there?
Yeah, of course.
I had baseball hats when I was running for mayor of Calgary that said "Make Calgary Great Again."
That's it.
I had judges and lawyers that were working for the Canadian government just ripping me a new one, saying, "He says make Calgary great again." We've heard that kind of language before. Yeah. But Doc, you're correct in that the MAGA movement, every conservative Canadian is saying Trump, 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 Trump. Yet the left-wing media in Canada, and it's all left-wing if it's mainstream, they all still suffer from Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, TDS.
Trump has not been president since the stolen election, and there's still Trump this and Trump, woof, 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 Trump. How bad he is. It's insane. So you're correct. It is a worldwide movement. So in your opinion now, what happens if Trump wins?
That's when things get fun. That's when things get a lot of fun. If Trump wins, I think the deep state, the administrative state, the establishment is going to see probably the single greatest assault ever on them since post World War II, since we really start to see the emergence of the unipolar world and the liberal world order and the like. If Trump wins, we are going to see, especially with Robert Kennedy at the helm. Keep in mind, there's he firmly believes, I think he's right, that the CIA was behind his father's death, behind his uncle's death, and they're ready to just. Can you imagine him being in charge of cleaning up the CIA? Stephen Miller, who's the senior advisor to Trump, he was on a good friend of mine, Stephen Gardner's YouTube channel. I just was with Stephen yesterday, did a interview with him, and Stephen Miller told Gardner that they already have over 500 executive orders ready to go to be signed by Trump starting day one of his presidency. And they all basically are designed to dismantle the administrative state. It started, I don't know if you were following our Chevron decision with the Supreme Court. That was huge. Are you familiar with that?
I didn't watch that one, no.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So because this is really part of our administrative state. So back in 1984, it's called the Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council case. What the Supreme Court ruled back then was that all courts, you're not going to believe this. This was a literal ruling. All courts had to basically give deference to federal agencies as the experts when it comes to creating regulations based on totally ambiguous law. Again, they were the experts. They were the credentialed class. Courts, lawyers, the jurists, they knew nothing about these EPA regulations. They knew nothing about these emissions regulations. They knew nothing about any of these. So they actually had to assume They had to assume that our regulatory agencies were always right. That's why our regulatory agencies had so much power. That's why OSHA, the occupational regulatory agency, could come in and say you had to get jabbed, and you had to, or you could get fired if you were part of a company that had 100 employees or more. You had to get vaccinated or you're fired. No law gave them that authority. Right? No Congress gave them authority. It was this Chevron authority that they had, going back to the Chevron decision. Our Supreme Court overturned it. They got rid of Chevron. My daughter goes to law school, and she said they had to literally throw out the 1 semester course you would take on the Chevron precedent because it all got thrown out the window. And you even had, this is the funniest thing, you even had leftist professors literally crying over this thing, having a temper tantrum, saying, now what are we going to do? I train my law students to become these Chevron lawyers to be able to represent these regulatory agencies, and now they have no jobs anymore. So
I'm sure they do. McDonald's is hiring in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. McDonald's is hiring. Well, you're going to have to get in line with Kamala, because I don't think she's ever worked there either. So, so I think you're going to see the continuation of that. It already started with that Supreme Court decision of starting to dismantle this administrative state. I think you'll see Trump continue with that. I think you'll see Schedule F implement in some way, shape, or form. That was his final executive order. That's like Order 66 of the Jedi, that basically automatically terminates tens of thousands of federal employees' employment. I mean, the federal government has like nearly 300 executive branch departments, bureaus, agencies, sub-agencies. What's so bizarre, as I understand it, is it's not approved. None of these agencies are approved by Congress. Congress funds them, but they just don't ask questions. It's kind of almost like another Chevron sort of deference. And so I think one of the things that Trump's and his team are going to do is they're going to start slashing those agencies and then require congressional approval for any and all executive branch departments, bureaus, agencies, and the like. So I think that's going to be a big thing. But you're going to see drill, baby, drill. You're going to see the wall going back up. You're going to see mass deportations. It's going to be a party.
One thing I hope he changes is I hope he makes it easier for Canadians to take all their wealth and just become Americans.
Oh, I would love that. Absolutely.
It's very difficult right now as a Canadian to even get an E2 visa within the States. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but that's what's going on with the Democrat Party. They don't want, I guess, future Republicans coming into the country. And the other thing I hope he does, and to every deity in the universe, please annex Canada and imprison every left-wing fruitard that runs our government. Please, Trump, annex the country. I would love to see Canada, except Quebec, become America. That would be absolutely fantastic.
Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be neat. Well, a civilizationalist state. I think that's I
think it'd be a wonderful thing. I've wanted that for quite some time. Oh, and I got sternly lectured in court by a judge about the fact that Canada is the greatest country in the world. Why would you ever want to see it annexed by the Americans? Like, Canada is not the greatest country in the world. It's number 63 in medicine and something like number 48 in education. Panama's got better healthcare than Canada. Panama's in the top 15 for healthcare. It's just
Panama is a very impressive country. They punch way above their weight, no question.
They really do, and Canada should have been doing just that, but it hasn't been. So these are the things that I would love to see happen. But I got to get your take on this craziness, this insane. No, he's a lunatic. Winnie the Pooh, Xi Jinping in China. This clown here who wants Taiwan. Now he wants to go to war with India. Now he's also trying to get into, is it Bhutan, I believe he's trying to get into, so that he has more control over what they call the chicken neck in India. But I should probably bring up a world map for you on that one. So China is in the midst of its own collapse. What do you think Trump's policy is going to be on Xi Jinping in China if he wins?
I think he'll go back to being confrontational with him. You know, he broke the cardinal rule with China in his first term. The cardinal rule was you always appease China so as to woo them into the liberal international order. Trump was smart enough to recognize that was never going to happen, not the way it's structured, and so he chose confrontation instead, tariffs, threats, and the like. Yeah, so I think that's what you'll see. He never had much time for the WTO or the IMF. He much preferred bilateral trade agreements as opposed to the one-size-fits-all multilateral agreements. So he would broker a bilateral trade agreement with China that I think bypasses WTO and the IMF. But I think he also would respect the fact that China is going through its own sort of cultural revolution, but the opposite of what they experienced with Mao. Mao hated Confucianism, and he hated religion, and he wanted Marxism to be the dominant, Leninism to be the dominant ideology. Xi, to his credit, is actually trying to go back to Confucianism and this whole idea of Tianxia, this mandate of heaven to re-sanctify China. Now, a lot of people are very cynical about that, probably rightly so. He's doing that because the Chinese people no longer buy communism. They obviously don't, because they've got a lot of money to buy other things. So they don't buy Marxism, they don't buy communism, and so the Chinese system and its social engineering and its feudal structure that it has is now being justified not so much by communism, but actually by this re-traditionalized Confucianism. And it's part of this kind of new civilizationalism where religion is becoming the most religion nationalism becoming the most powerful dynamics in the world today. I think Trump recognizes that, and I think he can use that to his advantage in working with China to say, you know what, we can get along. You know, we want to make America great again. You want to make Confucianism great again? Okay, we can get along. We can do that. I don't know where Taiwan's going to come in on that. We're going to have to see. I have a feeling my take is China will probably take the long game. That's normally what they do. The Sino specialists that I've been availing myself of all really agree on that. They will talk tough and they will act tough with Taiwan. But we do have to remember the second largest party in Taiwan is sort of a reunificationist kind of pro-China party. They're going to wait that out, and they think that over time, Taiwan will voluntarily want to reassemble with China. But we'll have to see. It is obviously a hot spot in the country. In terms of India, yeah, they've been they've been very nasty neighbors for 1,000 years, and so the saber rattling isn't anything new. The BJP party, the Narendra Modi, they'll be fine. I think they'll be able to manage it, no problem.
Yeah, India is a nuclear power because of Canada, because Canada was foolish enough to sell CANDU reactors to India way back in the 70s and the 80s. Which takes unrefined uranium and spits out more plutonium than any reactor ever built. And they figured it out. Damn it.
Sure.
So, that's the concern that I have there. But now the Putin issue. Let's talk about this for a second. There he is. This guy takes his country seriously. He takes leadership seriously. My take was that Vladimir Putin of Russia would rather do business with the United States than go to war with the United States. That's my thought.
Yes, I think you're flat out right on that. Yeah,
I think Trump wants to do business with Putin. That's my thought too. So I want to get your take on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Putin pre-2012 was a very pragmatic, very pro-West leader. I mean, that's the unanimous assessment of Putin. Remember, Putin's one of his most famous speeches was at the Munich Security Council in 2007. You can watch it on YouTube. It's a fascinating speech, 45 minutes or so. This is the one where he said, this is a NATO summit that he's speaking at. He went to every NATO summit from 2001 to 2007. He was invited every year. He no longer went after 2008 when they crossed a red line. And he said, bottom line, our security requires that Belarus, Ukraine, and Georgia not join NATO. He had a huge issue, as did every single Russian leader, starting with Gorbachev. Huge issue with the incessant eastward expansion of NATO. RFK talks about this all the time. John Mearsheimer talks about this all the time. There's no way you can't. The paper trail of this concern goes back 30 years. It was after when Germany got reunited and Eastern Germany get assimilated into Western Germany. That meant NATO would move eastward. And Gorbachev was very nervous about that. And James Baker, Secretary of State at the time, via George Sr., Bush Sr., said, we will not go beyond, NATO will not expand beyond Eastern Germany. Obviously, they didn't keep their promise. NATO doubled in that period of time over those last 30 years. And Putin said, I'm sorry, guys, I want to do business with you. There was even a time, he talked to, I thought it was to Clinton, because he was elected in 2000 and Clinton was still president for that year. You didn't have George W. Bush taking power until 2001. Apparently, even Putin and Clinton talked about Russia actually joining NATO, which would have been very, very fascinating. But regardless, he said in that speech in 2007, that's the red line. You cannot bring in Ukraine, Belarus, or Georgia. What does NATO do in 2008? What three nations do they invite into NATO? Belarus, Ukraine, and Georgia. And that's when you start seeing Putin take a very adversarial stance against NATO. That's when he realized you can't, I like to tell my listeners this. He basically looks at them the way we look at them. He doesn't trust them. He thinks they're corrupt to the core. He thinks they're just there for their own political and economic benefit. And he may be as well, but hey, he's got a nation to run. He's got his own interests to protect. And so we kept expanding into encroaching into his territory, just like Khrushchev tried to do in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And we said, no way, man, we'll have World War III over this. You're not coming inside our hegemon. That's what great powers do. Great powers do not entertain peer competitors. Putin gave the exact same warnings. We will not even remotely entertain a peer competitor within our orthosphere, within our Eurasian sphere. We called his bluff, and here we are. And I think it's terrible. I'm describing it. I'm not prescribing it. But the idea that NATO is not accountable for what happened is absurd. Putin ultimately made this decision, but NATO certainly poked the bear. They provoked it. And now we're seeing so many, it's just so many dead Ukrainians as a result. It's beyond tragic. And Ukraine will never return to its pre-February 2022 borders. It will not happen. Russia has annexed 5 regions. They are not giving that up. As far as they're concerned, an attack on Zaporozhye or Donetsk or Lugansk or Crimea, any one of those is an attack on Russia, and it will warrant nuclear weapons if they feel it is necessary for their existential survival. And we could throw all the money we want into Ukraine. It's not going to change anything at all. If anything, the Russians they're winning a war of attrition that I think Putin has set into motion, and there's no getting that. 20% of Ukraine is gone permanently. There's just no way around it. And I think in the end, we only have ourselves to blame.
Oh, we do. It's the entire Western world. Even idiot boy Trudeau is still yip-yapping about the fact that we got to go to war with Russia.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I hear you. We're doing it too.
The Canada Revenue Agency. This is a group of people I fight with all the time for my clients. They have now more employees stealing money from Canadians than we have soldiers in the Canadian military.
Wow.
So what
Wow.
exactly is he planning on throwing at Russia? And the vast majority of the new Canadian military are not even Canadian citizens.
Wow.
Yeah, no, a lot of them are Muslims. And what the Muslims will do is they'll join the Navy because we have 3 diesel-powered frigates. One now is a museum. So they get to do nothing all day. And the question would be is, would they actually fight for anything Canadian or anything Western? No,
Right.
they'll turn their guns on us. That's how Canada functions. Now, as for Putin, I agree with him. He needs a buffer zone between his western border and the eastern border of NATO. I totally understand where he's coming from. I hate the fact that Europeans are dying in this,
Yes.
but I understand.
Yeah.
I do understand.
Yeah.
Well, Trump
And
did say-
for me, it's personal too, because I'm Eastern Orthodox. I converted back in 17, 18 years ago. So to watch Orthodox brothers kill each other is just, it's horrible. I mean, it's one of the patriarchs said it's like Cain and Abel again. It's just terrible. So it's tragic everywhere around. But I do think more and more people are coming to the realization that our hands are not innocent in this.
No, I'm the last one to say that we did nothing wrong. We did everything wrong.
Right.
Should have left them alone. And,
Yeah.
and when the Soviet or Russians, when they decided they wanted to try to join NATO, and America said no, that was a bad move.
Yeah,
That was
I
a
agree.
really bad move.
I agree. The world would have been very different.
Very much so. China's nonsense, Islam's nonsense would not exist had Russia been part of NATO.
Yeah.
My personal take on the whole thing. So we do have a problem. This is something Americans maybe don't know. I'll repeat myself from earlier. Radical Islam runs the section of the country known as Southern Ontario, which is just slightly north of New York State and about 4 hours east of Detroit. Radical Islam runs it, and Canada is being used as what we call an aircraft carrier to get Islamic adherents and the crazy Islamic adherents into the United States, because it's apparently quite easy to just jump on a sailboat in Toronto and end up in Rochester, New York. No one's going to stop you from doing it. So what do we do here? What should Trump do should he win this election about this mass terror immigration coming from Canada? Go ahead.
Well, to the extent that they're illegal, there's going to be mass deportations. That's just going to happen. There's no way around that. There's a supermajority support. He's got the wind at his back in terms of the poll numbers. Even not quite a majority, but one of the studies I saw had about 40% Democrats supporting mass deportations. It's very interesting. The Islamic question is it's more reflective of actually a civil war inside the Democrat Party here, with particularly the pro-Palestinian progressives on the one side and the pro-Israeli liberals on the other. I don't know if you saw, there's the mayor of Hamtramck, Michigan. Michigan has the highest density Muslim population in the country, in Dearborn and Hamtramck, just outside of Detroit. And he actually endorsed Trump. He's a Democrat, and they have an all-Muslim city council. One of the first acts, interestingly enough, was to pass a law banning the pride flag, the LGBT rainbow flag, which really upset all the woke Democrats in town. And again, it's this is where identity politics begins to split, right, and go in its own tribalistic direction. So the only thing that the LGBT community and the Muslim community have in common in the realm of identity politics is victimhood. But what happens with when one of those groups achieves political power, where they're not victims anymore? So they basically throw all the other victim identities under the bus, and they start legislating their particular moral customs. So. No, right. I think what you're seeing here in the United, I know, it's just truth is stranger than fiction. I think what you're seeing here, ironically, is our Muslim population is very small, comparatively speaking, certainly compared to Canada, to Europe, with being in its proximity to Northern Africa and the Middle East. So it's not so much of an issue here outside of, ironically, a serious civil war happening in the Democratic Party. And the reason why the mayor of Hamtramck endorsed Trump is because they were shut out of the Democrat convention. Everybody who was anybody got to get up there and give their spiel at the Democrat convention, except for anyone who's pro Palestinian. And so they're, it's sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they're retaliating right now. So our politics is very interesting, where we're actually seeing the Muslim section of our country ironically aligning with Trump right now. But I think not because they like him per se, but as a way of getting back at the Democrats for disenfranchising them, just generally and particularly at the convention. But if they're illegal, then they're going to be deported. That's Trump's promise.
All right. Well, because there's going to be a lot of Muslims trying to get in to the United States if Trump wins. That's the way that's being forced right now. I don't think Americans understand just how bad Canada has become for foreign infiltration. It is illegal pretty much to state that you don't like seeing Muslims in your country. You don't like seeing radical Islam running not one, but 7 major cities inside the province of Ontario. So you go to prison for that. Now, they arrested me for stating that, this Islam stuff, it's pretty dangerous. And then I cracked a joke and I got arrested for it 7 years ago. Do you know, that's actually still in the courts today. My next court appearance is next week. Yeah. They have me come back every month by Zoom just to irritate me. That's all that it is. They refuse to book a trial date. They refuse to do anything with this. Just to say, hey, you know what? We can mess with you anytime that we want.
Right.
But we can't say anything about it.
Right.
Yet, while white or Canadian-born people can't say anything about it, they are amassing a great deal of wealth, a great deal of political power in Canada, and a great deal of, let's call it what it is, fentanyl and guns. And this is all over the province of Ontario, where Toronto is, and the cops are all left-wing fruits, and they don't do anything about it. They have gone out of their way to state that being able to shoot at an 85% efficiency as police officers is, you guessed it, racist.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, don't arrest Muslims. And that's exactly what's going on right now in Canada. So America's got a lot to worry about from your neighbor to the north. Fortunately, I don't live in that nonsense anymore, but
Yeah. Oh, now you're just showing off. Stop that. What you're bringing up is very, very interesting, because you're seeing it particularly from people like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. Giorgia Meloni has been talking about it in Italy, of course, Marine Le Pen in France, and the National Rally as a whole. And scholars are calling it civilizational populism. And it's very interesting. So we talked about populism as being this vertical divide between the people versus the permanent political class, as opposed to a horizontal divide left and right. But what's interesting with populism is it doesn't really tell you much about the ideology. Anybody could be a populist, right? Marxists could be populist. And we see that in Latin America. A lot of the populist movements are socialist movements. You could be conservative. You could be right-wing. Populism is more structural than systematic. So this is where civilizationalism is coming in, particularly in Europe. And civilizationalism reimagines, or it interprets better, this divide, this vertical divide, as a secular globalist elite that's selling out the nation, the culture, the custom and tradition, particularly in terms of their national sovereignty and border security and cultural sovereignty, for their own political and economic benefit. And what you're seeing in terms of the rhetoric that's coming out of this, in terms of the pushback and the blowback, is being called civilizationalist, in the sense that we tend to think of Marine Le Pen, Geert Wilders, Viktor Orban, Giorgia Meloni, Nigel Farage. We tend to think of them as, quote, nationalists. But more and more scholars are saying, well, they're very concerned about national sovereignty, sure, but they're not French. The French right isn't concerned about Swedes, and the Italian right isn't concerned about Spaniards. The concerns aren't nationalist. What are they concerned about? What are they concerned about in terms of the immigration? They're concerned about their culture, their European culture being assaulted by an enemy culture, by a foreign culture. And so the problem isn't nationalist. The other is civilizationalist. It's Islam. It's the Middle East. It's Northern Africa. That's a problem because they don't assimilate into European values. You'll get a kick out of this. Christianity now is being defended in some of the most secular parts in Europe. We're talking Sweden. We're talking the Netherlands. We're talking France. France has, as you know, the policy called laïcité. And laïcité is a secular public square where no religion comes into the public square. And they take great pride in their republic as a place of supposed freedom of all religions and so forth. Marine Le Pen and National Rally members are saying, if we want to keep our tradition of laïcité, we had better re-embrace our Christian heritage. Let that hit you. Right? If we want to be really good secularists, we're going to have to re-embrace our Christian heritage. Why? Because Christianity sees a distinction between church and state. So it enables us to have a religiously neutral public square. But Islam knows no such distinction. And the more Islam comes into France and takes over, we're going to be seeing our distinctly French civilization disappear. It's fascinating stuff. And the only way they can think of pushing back against this civilizational threat is by drawing from their own civilizationalist Christian frames of reference. So ironically, yeah, what you're talking about is it's back and it's bigger and it's stronger than ever. Civilizational populism.
Well, you can see it, the destruction and erosion of your own culture in the simplest of things. Canada used to do a lot of things right. Canada does nothing right anymore, except maybe hockey, lacrosse, and maple syrup. And that's about it. All right. But check this. Now we've eroded our own culture in that we've made hockey too expensive for anyone to play except for
there you go.
the upper middle class
Yeah.
and the rich.
Yeah.
To rent an hour of ice time, which is only 50 minutes because the Zamboni's got a flood for you, is in some cities $375 an hour.
No, are you serious? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's my hometown, Toronto area, absolutely. Vancouver, Calgary. It's crazy prices. So you can't afford your own culture. Then on top of all that, the other cultures have now come in, and all the football, Canadian and American football, the gridiron football fields are disappearing, and they're becoming cricket pitches. So we are losing our identity in every way imaginable. There's been no national statement that we are going to save hockey. We're going to force kids to skate and play this game because it's our game. We're going to force kids to play lacrosse to compete with the Americans and now the Czechs because it's our game. We don't do that. And then on top of letting our simple traditions go, well, now the environmentalists have stopped us from pulling sap out of maple trees. So maple syrup production farms are dropping to minimal levels. So that's gone. That's also cultural and economical. And then we have Islam coming in and buying up every church that they can possibly find. And because to them, that's a major victory. So
you're right. Turning it to a mosque.
Lutheran churches, well, every denomination really are losing their buildings. They're all becoming mosques.
Can I put in parentheses, Kevin? You just made me think of something. There is this is from the BBC. There is a small town in Italy called Monfalcone. It's on the Adriatic coast. They just banned cricket. They just banned but again, it's very much in line. They're banning cricket because of a large Bangladesh population there that's taking over their parks and taking over their way of life sort of thing. So they're fighting back again for right or wrong. I'm being descriptive, not prescriptive here. but it's
Yeah.
fascinating stuff. It's the same kind of thing on both sides of the Atlantic.
Sure. And civilizations have the right to protect themselves. We as a civilization have the right to say enough of this Islam nonsense and then just eventually ban it and run the proper ad campaigns, propaganda, if you will, to state, here's the truth behind Islam. Your daughter, who's 6 years old, is going to be married to some guy that you don't know by law if you let this stuff spread. If you're gay, they will behead you, light you on fire, or throw you off the nearest high-rise building. And that's the book tells them to do these things. Why are we not allowed to tell the truth about these things? And then why are we not allowed to protect ourselves from these really bad ideas? Well, in America, you've got the Constitution that says at least you can talk about it. But other Western countries, you can't. That's Ireland, Wales, Scotland, England, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. You cannot criticize this fake religion. It's bizarre. So I'm all for the protection of our culture. And quite frankly,
civilization.
Let me tell you one more thing here. White countries are the best. That's the reason everybody wants to go to them. Why can't we protect them? I want to protect them desperately. I would love to see all American culture revert to what it was the first time I went to the United States in 1986. I was floored at what I saw leaving my hometown and going to New York City and then the Tampa Bay region. And then all those years that I would spend in the United States, America just seemed to get better and better and better every year until it peaked and now it's dropping.
That was our height, the Reagan years. Yeah.
I want it back. American ingenuity. I love that slogan. And I loved working in the United States for 4 years like I did. I loved living there in the 90s because it was all about business, self-betterment. Get the product in.
Where were you again, Kevin? Where were you living?
What cities did I live in? Oh, we'll try to get them all in the right order. Started off in Harlem, then Trenton, New Jersey, South Side Chicago, West Philadelphia, all the really rough towns. Pittsburgh, Denver, Kansas City, Biloxi, Tampa, Phoenix. I'm missing one.
Wow, you're all over. Wow.
It was great. I had a blast, man. I just love America, or at least that America.
Wow.
This new one is nutty, and we need it back. So can we get it back? Is that possible? Can that America come back?
Oh, sure it can. Of course. There's always societies can renew. I mean, this is going back to the scholar Petro Sorokin, the Russian-American scholar who founded the sociology department at Harvard University. He found most. He would argue all civilizations. He has this massive book on society and culture, 1,000+ page book, where he talks about a threefold pattern in civilizations, where civilizations begin in a sort of a sacred font, where they have the highest aspirations of culture and literature and art and architecture and music and poetry and religion and so forth. And then they inevitably get secularized in that, okay, we gotta have banks and we gotta have money and we gotta figure out how to fight wars and all that sort of stuff. But even the secular part of society is still reflective. It's a material manifestation of the spiritual foundation of society. And the reason why all civilizations are rooted in religion is because religion uniquely provides the eternal source, the self-replenishing source for societal renewal. And that's particularly in our rituals, and for us to be the Christmas and the Easter period and the Thanksgivings and so forth, where society, just the gratitude of it and the sacredness of it, and our nationalist rituals are all ways of revivifying what is good and what is true and what is beautiful in society. And so then our secular part of society is just simply, it's going to be a manifestation of that in some way, shape, or form, but in a very material sense. So maybe our money will be gold, and why is it gold? Because gold comes from heaven, it comes from the gods or something. But I'm going to use it to buy all kinds of things. I'm not going to use it to just buy religious things. So it's going to reflect the religious origins of civilization, but it'll go beyond it as well. But then he says, inevitably, societies secularize. Now, he didn't use that term. He called it sensate. And that is where secular life, business life, military life, political life, whatever it is, cuts itself off inevitably. And it's literally a prodigal journey. It just doesn't think it needs its religious foundations for renewal anymore. And so it goes off on a secular journey. It goes off and has its prodigal, or like the Iliad, as it begins in media race, in the middle of things, far away in Troy, far away from home, from Greece. And then he says, inevitably, those systems eventually just wither away and die. And they wither away and die because they've cut themselves off from any kind of self-replenishing source of renewal. But then this is what he said, which is now Oswald Spengler said, that's it. You have the rise and the fall of civilization, and that's it. They all die eventually. What Sorkin argued against Spengler is, no, you're missing it. When they begin to rot and die, they turn into compost. And what does compost do? It reawakens. Exactly. It reawakens the seeds underneath. What are those seeds? Religion, the sacred. Why are they still there? Because they never die. That's that by definition. They are the self-replenishing source for societal renewal. So eventually, as society rots, at the same time, there's a renaissance. There's a renewal that always happens. At the very least, they're going to get another religion, right? Just the way like pagan Rome kind of started to rot out and turn to Christianity, that they saw as the fulfillment of the Athenian and Jerusalem and Roman conception of life. So yes, of course, we can go back. Yes, of course. As a matter of fact, I would argue all societies go back in some way, shape, or form. Now they can get conquered. That obviously happened in Asia Minor and in Turkey. They can get conquered, and so there'll be another religious flourishing there. But generally speaking, what you'll see societies rise, they'll flourish, then they kind of go on a prodigal journey. They begin to rot, but in that rot, they turn into compost, and society gets renewed again. That's where I think, to be honest with you, if you follow the American legacy media, they're all freaked out right now about like theocracy and white nationalists. I'm not white so much, but Christian nationalists and so on. And they're like, oh, it's just the latest MAGA movement and Christian nationalism and theocracy. And my thing is, well, but that's the pattern. Again, not that it's right or wrong or whatever. The pattern is that we start off, as Puritans coming out here in the 17th century, and we establish a New Jerusalem and so forth. But then it develops. We create a constitutional government that enshrines a lot of those biblical sentiments, but with clear executive restraints and so on, so we can experience our highest human freedom and flourishing. Then we go off on this bizarre prodigal journey that we've been talking so much about tonight with the neo-feudalism and so forth.
Right.
And then it starts to rot. So what are we going to start flourishing again? A kind of Christian nationalism is going to start coming back. It's as natural and as organic. Same, you're seeing it in Europe as well. And by God's grace, we'll see it in Canada as well, because you guys have like the ultimate like national anthem, which is basically a prayer. I love your guys' national anthem. So.
Yeah, we have two national anthems. The one that the French use in Quebec is not even the same song. It's actually a better song, believe it or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you should do a direct translation. You're thinking, what? It's not the same song. It's not even about the same country, if you can believe it.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
All right, Steve, Dr. Steve Turley, everybody who's joining us here, podcaster from the United States, author, obviously genius. You've been listening to him for the last almost 2 hours. You have a book coming out. Go ahead and tell us about it.
Yeah, it's Fight: How Trump and the MAGA Movement Are Changing the World. We have a launch party tomorrow night. So I think if you go to fight.turleytalks.com, there's information about that. At least you can get information about that there. But yeah, it's really exciting. It's a book that talks about how the MAGA movement is actually reflective of these much wider worldwide trends that are happening, where more and more populations are rejecting this one-size-fits-all secular liberal globalism and are instead going back and returning to nation, culture, custom, and tradition. So the book explores all the ways in which the MAGA movement is actually reflective of these larger global trends.
Perfect. I just got to announce something as well, because I've been helping Canadians with their taxes for a while, and now I'm helping Americans with their taxes. So if anybody has IRS debt, if you have a corporation that is dying in IRS taxes, state taxes, bank loans, supplier bills, whatever your problem is, just like in Canada, I can now take all of your corporate debt away from you by buying your corporation and absolving you of any and all liabilities. You can start your life over in less than 3 weeks. Head over to KevinJJohnston.me. That's my name, KevinJJohnston.me. Let's get the process started. Let's get your life back, because it's yours, not the IRS's. Wow, we're down to our last 10 minutes, Doc. So what is it that you'd like to cover last? You're up.
Oh my, what's going on? Well, one of the things that I think is so fascinating that we're seeing, that no matter what happens in November, is that 85% of the world's population appears to have decided they're going to go more towards this civilizationalist paradigm. And I'm thinking particularly, and you and I were talking about this earlier before the interview, I'm thinking particularly the rise of BRICS. It's a very, very interesting application. We talk often about a parallel economy rising up, and I can't help but think of BRICS as sort of a parallel economy on steroids. We're quite literally a parallel world, and we're seeing interest in membership in BRICS just going through the roof. They're now, what are they, at 11 countries now with BRICS Plus, with 3 OPEC nations, and regardless of what happens in Canada or America, the world appears to have decided to go in a different direction. And the direction is a much more conservative direction, meaning a more civilizationalist direction, a more traditionalist direction, where they honor their own cultures, customs, and traditions. One of the most interesting things with BRICS, if you think about it, is the countries, the 5 founding countries, all have radically different political systems. They all have radically different economic systems. They have radically different cultural systems. And yet they're all able to come together and mutually affirm their civilizational identity. So it's obviously Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. We're seeing the same thing now by bringing in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran. And what we're seeing is that they're more and more saying, look, you have the right to be who you are. We're not going to impose, like the G7 does, this one-size-fits-all globalist, liberal political and economic structure on you that has to be run by a bunch of centralized oligarchs. And the world just seems like it's very attracted to that model. And so no matter what happens in November, no matter what happens to our 2 countries, the world does seem to have decided it's moving in a civilizationalist, multipolar direction, and it's really not interested in the bullies in Brussels or the demons in Davos or the dolts in DC.
Yeah, dolts, that's for sure. Could I interest you in just sticking around after the show? We're going to cut the show off right at the 2-hour mark. There's some more private questions I want to ask. If you got 10 minutes.
I might have 10. Yeah.
Okay, it's beautiful.
You got me well. I'm usually crashed by like 9 o'clock. So, but this is great. I've loved hanging out with you.
Well, what's funny here is that Panama stays in Eastern Standard Time. So right now I'm actually in the Central Time Zone. When the clocks switch in November, Panama will be in Toronto's time zone, in the Eastern Time Zone. It's going to throw me off for a couple of weeks, I'm sure. So I will feel your pain and tiredness in just a couple of weeks. I'm never a fan of when the clocks shift. But I just wanted to say here that I feel there's an opportunity to fix everything if we can all just start telling the truth.
Yes.
And I find that everybody is worried about offending people. Can we just get away from caring if stupid people are offended? Is it possible, you think, at some point where as a society, we can go back to the way it was in the 70s and 80s? If you had something to say, it flew out of your mouth And if someone was offended by it, you got a middle finger and you carried on. Can we get back there, you think? Is that coming back ever?
Oh yeah, no, it is. Wokeness has no future. Again, what we find with wokeness and the radical sanctification of offense is it offends even leftists. About you survey any woke issue among the left, and you ask them, do you support whatever it is, CRT in the schools or trans athletes, whatever. About half the left will say yes, but the other half will say no, right? The Bill Maher's, the Piers Morgans, even for a long time, Elon Musk said he was a center left who really wanted nothing to do with wokeness. Now, welcome to the far right, buddy, right? Everybody who's non-woke is far right at this point. So that's really cool, because if you think about it, wokeness splits the left. But it also, at the same time, unites the right. Because when you ask the right, do you support any woke issue? 100% of the right goes, no way. And I've done this. I've done this on stage at like these American Freedom Tours where Trump's been there and Trump Jr. and so forth. And I've looked at an audience of like 3,000. And I say, all right, so if you were leftist, half of you would say, yeah, I supported. The other half of you say, I don't support it. All right, but now I'm going to ask you rightists here. How many of you support this woke issue? Cricket. How many of you absolutely steadfastly oppose it? Now we're going, ah! So wokeness, ironically, has no future. It has no future because it splits the left, unites the right, and creates a supermajority against it. The only way it enforces itself on us is as long as we allow it. As long as we allow this neo-feudalist system where more and more power and wealth are getting in the hands of fewer and fewer people, and as long as we allow them to do it, they're going to do it. But the moment we push back, it's over.
Well, that is exactly what we need. It's going to be difficult in places like Canada, and I think now Mexico, they've got this new leftist president in there who's going to try. She took down the Caribbean Union flag, and she took down the Mexican flag behind her, pride flag, trans flag, when she gave one of her initial speeches to the public. So we have a lot of work to do to take this leftism down. I think maybe you got to come back on the show and we'll talk about the solutions to taking it down.
Sounds great.
That's great. That is for sure. How do people find you online? Go ahead.
Oh, you could just punch in my name, Dr. Steve Turley on YouTube. You'll find my channel there, or you can just go to my website, turleytalks.com.
Wow. This has been incredible. I'm honored that you decided to grace us with your presence tonight. I have had a great time, and I would love to do this again.
Right back at you, Kevin. It's all my honor. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And like I said, I feel like I've known you forever.
Well, let's make that happen. I can't wait. Dr. Steve Turley, everybody. Wow. What an incredible guy. This has been something I've been looking forward to forever. And yes, we podcasters out there, we actually not fantasize, but dream of that really awesome guy that we watch all the time being on our show. So Dr. Turley has done me an incredible service tonight, and all of you as well. So please do head over to Dr. Turley's website. That's turleytalks.com, and communicate with the gentleman, because he and his staff do get back to you. Buy his book. Just like you did with me with Masks or BS, that book. You guys did a lot for me. Thank you for it. Buy his book, which, of course, I will be doing right after the show. And I'll be reading it over the course of this weekend, because I am finally taking a day off. This has been wonderful. The comments have been great in TikTok, over here in Kick. Thank you. Thank you to everybody in Rumble for being here. And thank you for the likes, because they all do help this algorithm, this crazy algorithm that seems to elude some of us. But you're all helping us get closer to the top. Wow. My name is Kevin J. Johnston. This is the Kevin J. Johnston Show that runs every single Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on freedomreport.ca. I love you all, and good night.